Unveiling truths, no holds barred. Keep those Bible verses sharp.
Welcome to this deep dive. For you, the listener, our mission today is to exhaustively examine the structure of family life.
Right. We are looking directly at what you could call the divine blueprint.
Exactly. We want to investigate how different frameworks assign emotional and, structural weight to domestic roles. Because for a lot of people today, family is viewed as this organic, fluid social contract.
Yes, a contract that is constantly shifting.
Right. It's seen as an arrangement we just negotiate in real time. We adapt it based on changing cultural expectations or, shifting financial reality.
Or even just personal self-discovery.
Yeah, exactly. But the biblical text presents a completely different mechanical reality. It presents an explicit, non-negotiable divine blueprint.
And that tension is exactly what we're going to investigate today.
Right. The tension between a constantly evolving social contract and a permanent, rigid structure. So I will be aggressively introducing what we can call the blue corner.
Which is the secular and alternative religious perspectives.
Yes, bringing in modern sociology, secular humanism, Islamic marital law, Catholicism, and Eastern philosophies. And I'm doing that to challenge the red corner.
And the red corner is the exact literal text of the Bible.
Exactly. But before we even look at the specific roles of the husband, the wife, the parents, and the children, we really have to address the foundation.
Because you can't discuss the roles without knowing who assigned them.
Right. Where does the Bible actually claim this rigid arrangement began? And, why does that specific origin even matter for a modern listener who's just trying to figure out their own household?
Well, it matters intensely. It matters because this entire discussion is fundamentally an investigation of authority.
Okay, authority in what sense?
Think about it. If the family is just a human invention, if it is simply a highly practical domestic arrangement that ancient people created to share limited food resources, then the rules can change.
Right, because if we invented it to survive harsh winters or whatever, we can just reinvent it when we get heating.
Exactly. If human beings invented the family structure out of necessity, then human beings hold the absolute right to reinvent it when those necessities evolve.
Which is essentially the modern view.
Yes, but the Bible completely rejects that premise. The Bible claims a definitive originator. Yeah. The biblical text shows that the family unit is not some evolutionary milestone that humans just stumbled into over thousands of years of trial and error.
So it wasn't just a process of elimination.
No, it was directly, immediately, and intentionally created. The Bible shows that God created the very first human pair and deliberately brought them together in marriage.
Oh, wow. So that origin is basically the baseline for everything.
It is the entire baseline.
Yeah.
Because the Creator invented the dynamic, he retains the absolute exclusive right to write the instructions for how it operates.
Right, the divine blueprint.
Precisely. The biblical text presents this framework not as a helpful suggestion for domestic tranquility, but as a binding assertion of ownership.
So he designed the capacity of the people involved.
Yes. He designed the physical, emotional, and structural capacity of men, women, and children. And therefore, his parameters are presented as the only possible way to achieve genuine harmony within the home.
Okay, I have to stop you right there. I want to bring in the blue corner immediately.
Go ahead.
Because that assertion of ultimate, unquestionable authority runs directly into a massive wall of modern thought.
It certainly does.
If we look at secular humanism, specifically the framework outlined in the Humanist Manifesto III, the starting premise of human existence is just, well, it's entirely different.
It removes the originator completely.
Exactly. Secular humanism dictates that humans are an integral part of nature, right? We are the result of unguided evolutionary change without any supernaturalism whatsoever.
So there is no creator.
Right. And if there is no creator, there is no originator who holds copyright over the family structure. Therefore, ethical values and family structures are derived purely from human need.
They are continuously tested by human experience.
Yes, tested by experience. To a secular humanist, human beings are social by nature, and we find deep meaning in our relationships. But those relationships have to be governed by reason, Reason, compassion, and mutual agreement in the present moment.
Which means there is no divine blueprint.
None at all. From this perspective, forcing modern individuals into an ancient, rigid framework is viewed as a dangerous act of psychological suppression.
Because it limits personal autonomy.
Exactly. If the family is a fluid, evolving social contract, then roles should be constantly negotiated based on what brings maximum individual happiness right now, not dictated by an ancient text.
And that right there is exactly the dividing line.
How so?
Well, the secular humanist view requires you to view domestic roles as a negotiation between two independent contractors.
Right, you draft an agreement that works for both sides.
Yes, you write a contract that works for both of you today. And if one of you changes your mind tomorrow, or if the arrangement ceases to bring you maximum personal fulfillment, you just renegotiate, or you dissolve the contract.
Which happens a lot.
It does. But the biblical text operates on a completely different mechanical reality. It operates on the premise that maximum human happiness is actually achieved through obedience to the Creator's design.
Wait, rather than through personal autonomy.
Exactly, rather than through the endless pursuit of personal autonomy. The biblical model argues that if a husband and wife are constantly renegotiating their roles based on fluctuating emotions, they will inevitably exhaust themselves.
Because they're always arguing about who is in charge of what.
Yes, they will descend into a constant power struggle.
Which naturally leads us to the reality of power struggles, right? I mean, who actually holds the authority when those struggles happen?
Someone has to make the final call.
Right, because if the family is indeed a designed structure rather than a fluid contract, you can't have a perfectly equal hierarchy. When a final decision has to be made, someone is in charge.
That is logically unavoidable.
So this brings us directly to the first specific role in the biblical blueprint, the husband. What exactly does the text demand of him?
It demands an immense amount.
Because if the secular world sees this hierarchy as inherently oppressive, we really need to know what the actual mechanics of this authority look like.
Okay, the biblical standard for the husband establishes a clear, undeniable line of authority. But it completely redefines how that authority operates in practice.
How does it redefine it?
The Bible shows that a husband is the head of his wife. Now, we absolutely must address the reality of that word because it carries so much baggage.
Oh, definitely. When modern listeners hear head or authority in a home, they immediately picture a harsh dictator.
Right. They picture someone who issues demands, expects absolute compliance without question, and extracts service and comfort from his family.
While offering very little in return.
Exactly. But the biblical text explicitly rules out that kind of behavior. The Bible shows that a husband must exercise his leadership with absolute self-sacrificing love.
Self-sacrificing love. Okay.
The exact standard given in the text is staggering. It says that he must love his wife just as Christ loved the congregation. Furthermore, he is explicitly required to love his wife as his own physical body.
Okay, I really want to push back heavily on what that actually looks like in practice.
I expected you would.
Because it is very easy to read those verses and think they sound poetic, but saying a man must love his wife as his own body carries an immense, highly literal burden of proof.
It is not poetry. It is a mechanical instruction.
Right, but modern sociology would look at that and argue that it doesn't matter how nicely you dress up the language. Assigning one gender ultimate authority is inherently prone to abuse.
That is a common critique, yes.
So how does the text mechanically prevent this loving headship from just becoming a benevolent dictatorship where the husband still gets exactly what he wants in the end?
The prevention of abuse is entirely dependent on the husband adhering strictly to the literal requirement of the text. It is an immense burden.
So it's not a free pass.
Not at all. Think about the mechanical reality of how you treat your own physical body. If your hand is injured, or if you accidentally burn your arm, you do not ignore it.
No, obviously not.
And you certainly do not punish it for being in pain. You immediately stop whatever else you are doing to protect it. You wrap it, and you care for it until it heals.
Oh, I see.
The Bible uses this exact, undeniable physical reality to describe domestic headship. A husband operating under this divine blueprint cannot be bitterly angry or abusive.
He has to treat her well-being as his own.
Yes, he is commanded to feed and cherish his wife. His authority is not a license to extract demands from her. It is a direct mandate to serve her.
To serve her and protect her.
Exactly, to ensure that she is thriving physically, emotionally, and spiritually. In this framework, the husband is held entirely accountable by the Creator for the emotional and physical safety of his household.
Wait, so if the household is failing?
If the household is failing, the husband bears the primary weight of that failure. It is a leadership defined by complete, continuous self-sacrifice.
Wow. Okay, that actually brings us to a massive institutional contrast. Because if we look at how this provision and protection is structured globally, we find highly divergent blueprints.
We certainly do.
I want to bring in Islamic marital jurisprudence here to challenge this concept of shared burden and provision. In Islam, the husband is designated as the qawwam.
Which means the protector and maintainer.
Exactly. And the principle of qawwama demands absolute financial guardianship from the husband. According to strict Islamic law, a husband must provide food, clothing, housing, and medical care for his wife.
Yes, that is his absolute legal obligation.
But here is where the mechanics of the blueprint get incredibly specific, and they completely diverge from Western assumptions. The husband must provide this full financial maintenance even if his wife is a millionaire.
That is a crucial distinction.
Right. Unlike the biblical model where we see this merging of lives and assets, a Muslim wife retains separate, absolute financial autonomy.
She keeps her own wealth entirely separate.
Exactly. Her mahr, which is the mandatory financial bridal gift given directly to her at the time of marriage, belongs exclusively to her.
The husband has no claim to it.
None at all. And any wealth she inherits, any money she earns from her own business ventures, it all belongs exclusively to her. She has zero legal or religious obligation to spend a single portion of her own money on the household.
Not on the rent, the groceries, or even the children.
Right. The husband must bear the entire financial weight of the family's survival and comfort, regardless of her personal wealth.
That introduces a very specific dynamic regarding how unity is achieved in a marriage.
Yeah, it completely changes the power dynamic.
The Islamic model compartmentalizes the financial responsibility entirely onto the man, creating a highly structured separation of assets.
And this creates a distinct friction regarding the concept of total unity, doesn't it? Because the Bible shows that a husband and wife become one flesh.
Yes, the biblical model demands total material, physical, and structural unity.
So if the husband falls into debt, the wife is structurally in debt alongside him because their lives are fully merged.
They share the burden entirely.
But the Islamic model mandates strict financial separation. It places the absolute burden of provision on the husband while granting the wife total financial independence and security.
So if the husband goes bankrupt in the Islamic framework, the wife's personal wealth remains legally protected and untouchable by him.
Exactly. So if the biblical model demands this total material and structural unity, rather than maintaining separate financial domains, how does the biblical text balance the scales?
Balance them in what way?
Well, the husband is commanded to exercise total self-sacrifice and bear the ultimate accountability. But what is the corresponding mechanical requirement placed on the wife? How does the text ensure this unified structure actually functions?
The biblical text balances the scales by requiring the wife to act as an empowered, active participant within that united framework.
Okay, an active participant.
Yes, but with a highly specific attitude toward the husband's authority. The Bible shows that wives are to exercise deep respect and supportive submission to their husbands.
Ah, there is that word, submission.
Yes, because the husband is commanded to exercise self-sacrificing love and bear the heavy accountability of headship before the Creator, the wife is directly instructed to respect that position.
To respect the accountability.
Exactly. She is to willingly cooperate with his leadership. But to understand this, we absolutely have to define what the biblical text means when it calls the wife a complement.
Okay, let's define it.
The Bible shows that the woman was created as a complement to the man. Mechanically speaking, a complement is never an inferior object.
It's not a lesser thing.
Not at all. It means two distinct, equally valuable parts uniting to form a complete whole.
Like pieces of a puzzle.
Exactly. Think of two individuals with different but equally essential capabilities dividing the heavy labor of a massive project.
Okay, I'm tracking.
One might carry the materials while the other measures and cuts. But neither can finish the project alone, and neither role is less important. Their differences are exactly what make their union successful.
But, the word submission carries an incredible amount of cultural baggage today.
It does. It is often deeply misunderstood.
Right. Because for the modern listener, secular society has framed submission as inherently degrading.
They view it as an erasure of identity.
Exactly. Many interpret it as a direct instruction for a woman to be voiceless, to simply sit in the background, abandon her own ambitions, and passively agree with whatever the husband decides without ever offering her own intellect to the situation.
Which is a complete, historically inaccurate misunderstanding of the biblical text.
Oh, so?
The text does not present a subservient, powerless role. The Bible shows an extensive, detailed description of a highly capable wife. and she is presented as a remarkably empowered, intelligent house manager.
What does she actually do in the text?
The text details her actions clearly. She evaluates real estate and buys a field with her own earnings. She makes independent business decisions.
Wait, really? She buys real estate?
Yes, she manages property and supply chains. She directs the household workers and organizes their tasks. She engages in hard physical labor and ensures her family is prepared for the winter.
That sounds like a CEO.
It is a massive administrative and physical undertaking. She speaks with wisdom and provides deep moral instruction. Furthermore, the text explicitly states that her husband trusts her completely.
So she is not micromanaged.
Not at all. She is an active, highly capable, deeply trusted partner. Her submission is not a lack of intelligence, nor is it a suppression of her capability.
So what is it then?
Her submission is a willing, conscious decision to support the overall leadership of the husband, rather than competing with him for ultimate control of the household.
I see. So she uses her skills to support the structure, not fight it.
Exactly. She applies her massive capabilities toward building up the family within the specific structural order the Creator designed.
Okay, I am going to challenge this heavily with the blue corner again.
I am ready.
Because modern secular egalitarian models completely reject the premise that biological sex should ever determine who leads and who submits.
They view it as an arbitrary distinction.
Right. Secular sociology argues that healthy, thriving relationships rely on completely shared, non-gendered power dynamics. In a secular egalitarian marriage, roles are based entirely on individual competence.
And personal preference.
Yeah, personal preference and ongoing negotiation. It is highly pragmatic.
Yeah.
If the wife is better at managing finances and tracking investments, she leads the finances.
And if she is the better decision maker in a crisis.
Then she takes point during emergencies. Power is fluid, it's shared equally, and it's constantly evaluated to ensure fairness.
It's an ongoing negotiation.
Exactly. But we don't even have to look outside of religion to find fierce opposition to the biblical framework you just described. We have to look at the deep fundamental fractures within Christianity itself over these exact verses.
Yes, the interpretation of the verses regarding headship and submission creates a very sharp dividing line among people who claim to follow the Bible.
Precisely. On one side, you have Southern Baptists and other conservative denominations who fiercely defend a framework known as complementarianism.
Which is the strict literal view.
Right. It's the view that men and women have equal worth before the Creator, but distinctly different male-led domestic and ecclesiastical roles. They assert that ultimate authority, both in the home and in the church, is permanently restricted to men.
They argue that altering this dynamic is a direct violation of the divine blueprint.
Yes, they do. But conversely, progressive Protestants, such as many Methodists and Presbyterians, strongly endorse Christian egalitarianism.
They interpret the texts quite differently.
They interpret the Bible as commanding mutual submission between spouses. They view the traditional gender hierarchy not as a divine permanent rule established at creation, but as a cultural relic.
A relic of the ancient patriarchal Middle East.
Exactly. They argue that insisting on female submission suppresses the full God-given potential of women. They believe that true biblical harmony is found when both spouses submit equally to one another without any designated head.
They believe the rigid structure was meant for a specific time and place, not for modern households.
Exactly. So how does the red corner respond to that?
The investigation of the text, however, shows that the red corner position, the strict interpretation of the biblical baseline, maintains that these distinct roles are tied directly to the creation account.
Not to the culture of the time?
Correct. Not to local cultural customs of the ancient Middle East. The biblical text anchors the husband's headship and the wife's complementary role in the very design of the first human pair.
Which predates any of those cultures.
Long before any ancient Middle Eastern culture even existed. The baseline relies on the premise that the Creator designed these distinct, interlocking roles of loving headship and respectful submission, precisely to prevent the constant power struggles that egalitarian models require couples to navigate.
Wait, egalitarian models require power struggles?
Think about the mechanics of it. If both parties hold strictly equal authority, every major disagreement must be negotiated until one party capitulates.
Oh, I see, because there is no tiebreaker.
Exactly. And that constant negotiation can lead to deep resentment over time. The biblical blueprint bypasses this by establishing a permanent, predefined line of authority.
But it demands that authority be exercised with pure love.
Yes. It demands that it be exercised with pure love and demanding that it be met with pure respect.
Okay, but Interlocking the husband and the wife is really only the first phase of this architectural blueprint.
That is just the baseline of the marriage itself.
Right. A marriage between two adults is complex enough, but what happens to this structural arrangement when children enter the equation?
The entire dynamic changes drastically.
It really does. Who holds the ultimate jurisdictional responsibility for them? I mean, does the biblical text allow parents to hand over the moral formation of their children to the surrounding culture? Like to secular schools or state institutions?
The biblical text absolutely forbids it.
Forbids it completely.
Yes. The responsibility placed on parents is a joint, heavy, and completely non-delegable mandate. The Bible shows that parents must execute continuous, daily moral education.
Okay, continuous and daily. What does that actually look like?
It specifically details the mechanics of how this must be done. It says that these instructions must be on the parents' hearts first.
Meaning they have to actually practice what they preach.
Precisely. The parents must actually believe and practice the standards themselves. And then they must meticulously teach them to their children when they sit in their house, when they walk on the road, when they lie down, and when they get up.
Wow. That language implies a total immersive environment.
It is meant to be immersive.
So it's not just, dropping a child off at a religious class for 1 hour in the weekend and assuming the job is done.
Exactly. It is a continuous, moment-by-moment integration of the Creator's standards into the daily life and daily conversations of the child.
So the parents are the primary source.
They are designated as the primary, inescapable source of moral reality. They cannot outsource this responsibility.
That is a massive amount of pressure on the parents.
It is. And this heavy requirement for instruction must be balanced with intense emotional control on the part of the parents.
Emotional control, like not losing their temper.
Yes. The Bible shows that fathers are explicitly commanded not to be irritating or provoking their children to anger, but to go on raising them in the proper discipline and admonition.
So it requires deeply controlled, highly loving discipline.
It strictly forbids parents from using harsh, arbitrary, or physically abusive punishments. Anything that would break a child's spirit, humiliate them, or cause them to harbor deep, long-term resentment is forbidden.
So the authority is regulated.
Immensely regulated. The authority of the parents over the children is huge, but it's strictly regulated by the requirement to act with patience and self-control, reflecting the Creator's own patient treatment of humanity.
Okay, we have to introduce massive global counterclaims here.
Because the world views parenting very differently.
Extremely differently. Because the way parental authority is structured changes radically depending on where you look in the world. The idea that a husband and wife form an independent, self-contained unit to raise their children is deeply challenged by Eastern philosophies.
Yes, the Eastern models operate on a different hierarchy.
In traditional Eastern cultures, heavily influenced by Confucianism, the nuclear marriage is completely overridden by the concept of shao, or filial piety.
The reverence for the elders.
Right. In this framework, multi-generational clan seniority is the supreme virtue. A husband's absolute obedience and devotion to his living parents and his extended ancestors carries far more ethical weight than his alignment with his own wife.
It completely flips the priority of the nuclear family.
It really does. Let us look at a practical scenario. If there is a deep domestic conflict between a man's mother and his wife regarding how the household should be run or how the children should be disciplined.
Filial piety dictates that the mother's authority prevails.
Exactly. The individual nuclear unit of husband and wife is entirely secondary to the unbroken chain of the extended family line. The husband must side with his parents.
That presents a profound structural difference from the biblical model.
How does the biblical model handle that extended family dynamic?
The biblical text emphasizes a completely different priority. It states that a man will leave his father and his mother, and he will stick to his wife.
Oh, wow. So it explicitly severs that ultimate authority chain.
Yes. This establishes the newly formed nuclear marriage as the new primary unit of priority. The husband's primary allegiance shifts permanently from his parents to his wife.
But the Confucian model keeps that primary allegiance permanently tied to the parents, regardless of the marriage.
Exactly. The authority flows in completely different directions.
And the structural differences don't stop with Eastern philosophy. Let us look at Catholicism, which presents yet another distinct blueprint for parental authority.
The sacramental view of the family.
Yes. In Catholic doctrine, the family is not just a biological or social unit. It is explicitly defined as the domestic church.
Which carries massive theological weight.
It does. Marriage is viewed as an unbreakable sacrament, meaning it is a permanent spiritual reality that cannot be dissolved by any human authority, state law, or personal preference.
It is completely indissoluble.
Right. Furthermore, parental authority within the Catholic home is tightly intertwined with the liturgical authority of the Church itself.
So it is connected to the ecclesiastical hierarchy.
Exactly. This means that for a child raised in this framework, obedience to their parents is not just about, keeping peace in the living room or following house rules.
It is an act of spiritual obedience.
Yes, it is a direct form of religious devotion to the ecclesiastical hierarchy. The family operates as a miniature, direct extension of the universal church. It is heavily reliant on the sacraments, the priesthood, and centuries of church tradition for its moral survival and structure.
So it does not stand alone like a purely nuclear unit?
Right. So if parents are structurally mandated by the biblical text to provide this continuous, heavy moral instruction, and if the authority models vary so wildly across different global traditions,
We have to look at the children themselves.
yes, what is the exact mechanical requirement placed on the subjects of that instruction, the children, according to the rigid red corner blueprint?
The biblical text delivers the final, crucial piece of the architectural blueprint by placing a direct, unambiguous requirement on the children.
And what is that requirement?
The Bible shows that children are commanded to obey their parents in everything.
In everything.
In everything, for this is well-pleasing to the Lord. The text also links this obedience to a specific promise of endurance and well-being on the earth.
But I have to bring the modern perspective back in here, because to a modern ear, a command for children to obey their parents in everything sounds incredibly rigid,
It sounds authoritarian to the modern ear.
perhaps even dangerously authoritarian. In an era where we emphasize children's rights, bodily autonomy, and, allowing children to express their own individuality, how does the biblical text justify this absolute requirement for obedience? Does it view children simply as property to be managed?
The text absolutely does not view children as property, but it clearly explains the why behind this command.
Okay, what is the why?
This command is not about arbitrary rule following, nor is it a demand for blind subservience just to inflate the parent's ego or make the parents' lives more convenient.
So it's not just about keeping the kids quiet so the adults can relax.
Not at all. It is the specific necessary mechanism that removes domestic chaos from the home.
Removes chaos. How?
Children inherently lack the life experience, the emotional maturity, and the developed moral baseline required to make safe, long-term decisions for themselves.
Which is just a biological fact of human development.
Exactly. By maintaining a submissive attitude and obeying their parents, children actively bring structural harmony to the home. They complete the family loop.
The family loop. I like that.
Think of the structure we have mapped out. The husband exercises self-sacrificing headship. The wife provides capable, respectful submission. Together, the parents provide protective care and moral education to the children.
Right.
When the children respond to that care with obedience, it prevents the household from descending into constant argument, rebellion, and physical or moral danger.
Oh, I see. It closes the circuit safely.
Yes. When this exact parameter is followed, it creates a secure environment of peace where the child can safely grow, make mistakes under supervision, and where the parents can effectively lead without constant resistance.
Well, this brings us to the core of the entire investigation. Let us synthesize this massive amount of information for you, the listener, because the sheer scope of these opposing views dictates entirely different ways of living.
It really is a choice between two completely incompatible realities.
Exactly. The blue corner, representing modern secular sociology, fluid humanist ethics, and progressive psychological perspectives, claims that true happiness and domestic peace are found in total personal autonomy.
The pursuit of individual freedom.
Right. It argues that the family is and should be a flexible, temporary social contract. Roles should be entirely fluid based on the current situation.
Power dynamics should be ungendered.
Yes, completely ungendered. Individuals should be absolutely free to renegotiate their domestic reality at any time based on their personal needs, their career goals, or their shifting emotional state. If the contract no longer serves your individual happiness, you have the right and the obligation to alter or abandon it.
And standing directly against that massive cultural tide, the red corner remains completely unsoftened and unadapted.
It really doesn't budge at all.
The literal biblical text claims that lasting harmony is only achieved when human beings surrender their personal autonomy and align strictly with the Creator's specific, permanent instructions.
The permanent divine blueprint.
Yes, it presents a predefined, unyielding line of authority. Husbands who must exercise radical, self-sacrificing love and bear the heavy weight of accountability for the home.
Wives who must provide deep respect and highly capable, supportive submission without competing for dominance.
Parents who must dedicate themselves to continuous, daily moral education without ever provoking their children to anger or resentment.
And children who must remove chaos from the home through their obedience.
The biblical text asserts unequivocally that you cannot ignore the foundational instructions of the originator and expect the household to function without eventually breaking down.
If this deep dive investigation helped you re-examine the daily mechanics of your own household, we encourage you to carefully consider the varying perspectives presented today.
Look closely at the blueprints you are following.
Exactly. Look closely at how you assign responsibility, how you handle financial burdens, and how you resolve disputes. Take the time to better understand the foundations of family life, whether you currently view it as a fluid social contract that you can negotiate or an explicit divine design that requires your adherence.
Can a family unit truly achieve deep structural harmony by treating roles as fluid, temporary social contracts? Or does lasting happiness require an absolute surrender to a predefined permanent line of authority?
May your verses be sharp and your opponents unprepared.
May your verses be sharp and your opponents unprepared.
Sharp.